Okay. So again, good morning. So let's proceed with the topics today. The basic elements of vulnerability. Physical vulnerability relates to basic infrastructure, critical facilities, and agriculture. When you say vulnerability of buildings, pwede yan siya residential, right? Is affected by their site, design, shape, materials used in construction techniques, maintenance, and proximity of building to others. Vulnerability of infrastructures depends upon the type of hazard. Infrastructures group into transport system, just like the roads, railways, bridges, airports, port facilities. Utilities like water, electricity, and sewerage, and telecommunications. When you say telecommunications, these are the companies or agencies that we use in order for us to communicate with one another. Just like, for example, the PLDT, the Globe, the Smart. Yes, yeah. So when you say vulnerability of buildings, how vulnerable the building is towards the hazards, towards the disasters. Gaano ba ito katatag? Gaano ba ito ka-strong enough to withstand the intensity of earthquake? Gaano ba ito katatag ay yung foundation niya? No, ganyan ba? So, unsa siya kalig-on, kumbaga. Okay, when you say vulnerability of infrastructures, just like for example, again, when you say infrastructures, yung mga roads, railways, bridges, airports, these are the type of buildings or establishments, or just like the roads or the railways that everyone can enjoy. When you say everyone can enjoy, everyone can use it. Everyone and anyone can use the road. Right? The railways, the train uses railways. The bridges, everyone. With vehicle or with no vehicle, you can cross the bridges. You can use airports to travel from one place to another. The port and any other facilities. So let's go to social vulnerability. It focuses on special categories on vulnerable groups, livelihoods, perception of risk, local institutions, poverty, and etc. That is the social vulnerability. We already established the meaning of vulnerability, right? Now, social naman is the society. Okay? We all know that the society composed of many people, different races, different tribes, different beliefs, different perception in life, right? So these are the vulnerability of the society. Vulnerability of the groups, vulnerable of the livelihoods, of the, when you say livelihood, the job that you have right now, no, the means of living, perception of risk. How do you perceive risk? Right? Pwede mo siyang i-rate kung gaano ba ka-risky yung gagawin mo or yung trabaho mo. And local institutions and of course, the poverty. Poverty always belongs to social vulnerability because when you say poverty, hindi lang isang pamilya o isang tao lang nakakaranas ng poverty, kahirapan. Diba? Almost all of us experiences this. But of course, it's different, or it's a different story naman when it comes to the poorest of the poor. When you say poorest of the poor, yung hindi na talaga sila maka-afford ng pambili nila ng pagkain nila sa araw-araw. So, halos wala na talaga silang tirahan. Ito yung the core definition of poverty. Mahirap talaga. Hindi man lang makapag-aral because they have no source of income talaga. No? Economic vulnerability measures the risk of hazards causing losses of economic assets and processes. It focuses on evaluating the direct potential loss and indirect potential loss, the economic loss potential. Yes, that three. It evaluates these three. Okay, when you say economic vulnerability, when you say economic, it talks about the economic of our country. Ekonomiya nato. Now, how we can handle the demands of the society, demands of the country. That the whole country needs to be fed. Lalong-lalo na ngayong pandemic. Or during those times na nag-lockdown tayo, wala tayong trabaho kasi pinauwi tayo sa ating mga bahay and we cannot do anything because ang kalaban natin is invisible. Virus. Diba? Hindi natin matitrace kung saan sila nanggaling, kung nandito na ba sila sa lugar natin, kung sino yung carrier ng virus, right? No? Madidetermine lang natin yan sila too late na kapag nagpapakita na ng mga signs and symptoms. The economic vulnerability, how sustainable the economic of the Philippines, how stable it is in order for us or in order for the Philippines na maka-withstand sa calamity or disaster. So for example, the pandemic. Or just like for example, the typhoons. Because every year tayong binabagyo. So, sa economic vulnerability, it focuses on evaluating the direct loss potential. Okay, when you say direct loss potential, the production of goods and services, cost of damage and destruction of physical and social infrastructure and its repairs or replacement costs, crop damage and losses of the means of production. That is the direct loss. Because kapag wala to, bababa talagang ekonomiya natin. Because ano ba ang nagpapa-drive na economy natin? Of course, the resources natin, the goods and services na ino-offer natin. Diba? What are the goods? Yung palay natin, yung bigas natin, the corn, yung mga isda, diba? Na yung saging, yung mga gulay na minsan naman ini-export natin. Diba? Para mas malaki yung kita. Diba? That is the production of goods and services. Cost of damage and or destruction of physical and social infrastructure. Kapag may bagyo, anong lugar yung natatamaan? At ano yung mga damages na cause ng bagyong ito? Right, to be physical or social infrastructure. Just for example, dahil sa lakas ng bagyo, nagiba yung tulay. Dahil sa lakas ng earthquake, nagiba yung road or yung building. Just like that. And its repair and replacement cost. Of course, when you repair or when you replace a specific facility or even bisan suga lang na, no, even if you replace a specific bulb, no, in a building, no, it has a cost. Na may bayad yan because the bulb itself, pino-purchase ko pa yan, right? Pino-purchase ko pa yan, hindi yan binibigay sa inyo. Binibili yan lahat ng materials. Crop damage. no, the crops, the root crops, the rice fields, the corn fields, nagiba. Ang kasagingan, di ba? Nagiba because of the typhoon. And losses to the means of production. Just like for example, doon sa doon sa Katiil, right? Ano yung pangalan ng bagyo na sumira talaga sa Combal?
Pablo, ma'am.
Pablo? Oh, yes, Pablo. Because they didn't expect that Pablo will hit them directly. Because for how many years, diba, wala naman talagang dumadaan directly dun sa Combal. Right? Now, yung bagyong Pablo yun, dumaan doon. They are not prepared for this specific typhoon. They don't have any emergency preparations or in overall, they are 100% not ready to be hit by this typhoon. No, yung pinakamalaking damage sa kanila is not their houses, not their residences, but their livelihood. No, ano ba yung livelihood nila? Diba? May tanim sila.
Nature, ma'am.
Ha?
Sa nature sila nabuhi, ma'am.
Yes. Diba? Meron silang mga tanim, right? So,
Yes, ma'am. Palkata.
o palkata, even na kanang mga kalubinan, diba? Daghan kay silang mga fields or crops na na-damage because of this typhoon, and they cannot even determine how to cope up with this calamity or with this disaster. No? And because of this, they lost the means of production. Na because of that, nawala yung means nila sa pag-produce ng mga goods nila, nawala na rin yung means of livelihood nila. Means of living pala. Nawalan na rin sila ng trabaho, nawalan na sila ng pagkakitaan, wala na silang ikabubuhay sa pamilya nila. Kaya nga ang dami-daming taga-Combal dumayo dito or bumalik dito sa Davao para magtrabaho because their family business, no, their fields, no, ilahang mga pangkabuhayan dito is nawala because of that. Now, it takes years for them to cope up with that specific typhoon. And I think ngayon, naka-recover na naman sila. Naka-recover na sila. But that is a lesson learned, right? Now, when you say there's a typhoon or even if hindi typhoon, always be prepared for something unexpected to happen. Diba? Always prepare. Hindi dahil na you are a negative thinker or nag-iisip ka negatively, but it helps you to cope up right after, no, if man lang na maigo mo sa bagyo or sa calamity. At least you are prepared. You already know what to do if ever man lang na may mangyaring ganyan. Now, ang indirect loss potential naman, impact on loss production. So, dahil wala ng means of production nila, ano yung impact sa pagkawala ng production nila? Bababa yung economy, bababa yung economy ng Combal. Right? Nawawalan sila ng employment because the government of Combal don't have enough sources para mag-employ at magbayad pa ng mga employees. Diba? Vital services and income. the earning activities and secondary effects like the epidemics, inflation, income disparities, and etc. Economic loss potential. Anything concrete that affects the economy of a region and can be damaged by a hazard represents the risk of production, distribution, and consumption. So that is the economic loss potential. Now, the environmental vulnerability naman, the ecosystem or environmental vulnerability. When you say ecosystem, the nature, right? Now, it is important to find out how different kinds of natural environments cope with and recover from different hazards. So, ano ba yung pinaka top hazards when it comes to ecosystem? Yung nadadamage talaga yung
Typhoon,
nature
ma'am.
natin. Ha?
Typhoon, landslide.
Typhoon, landslide, yung man-made. Earthquake, yung man-made na hazard. Do you have any idea?
Pagka na landslide, ma'am, diba, man-made, ma'am, pud na, ma'am, usahay.
Ang
Landslide, ma'am.
landslide, minsan,
Sunog, ma'am.
man-made siya because of what?
Maputol sa mga kahoy, ma'am.
Yes, illegal logging. Aside from that,
Illegal mining, ma'am.
illegal mining, perfect. Yes, that is one of the top ano ba yun? Yung hazard when it comes to ecosystem. The illegal mining and the illegal logging. Why? Bakit illegal logging? Because when you cut a tree, you don't know how many years, even decades, that tree is. Pila na edad anak niya. No, ilang taon na tong puno na to. Ilang years na tong nag-i-exist dun sa lugar na yon. No? Or dun sa mountain na yun. Now, kapag puputol ka, ang sabi nila is, if you cut a tree, replace it with a new one. Diba? Magtanim ka daw ng panibagong seedling. Now, itong seedling na to, compare sa seedling na to and sa tree na pinutol mo, ang layo ng agwat. No? Ang seedling ba, are they able to withstand heavy rains? Diba? Bata pa kailang ugat. Diba? Bata pa yung mga ugat nila compare dun sa puno na pinutol ninyo. Illegally pa. But did you get it? Na yung ugat ng puno na yun yung responsible na mag-hold the soil together in order for the land not to collapse during heavy rains. Yun. Alright? Aside from that, that tree gives us the oxygen that we need in order for us to breathe, in order for us to live. Diba? Now, everything that we exhale is the carbon dioxide na kailangan naman, and even yung pag-utot na to, is kailangan naman din ng mga puno at ng mga halaman na pinaprocess nila yun in order for them to live also other than the sunlight and the water. In exchange, they release oxygen for us.
Ma'am, pwede mo share?
Yes.
Kapara sa nahitabo dito sa ma'am, Maragusan, ma'am, katong pagbagyong Pablo, ma'am, isa jud siya ka barangay ang na-wash out dito, ma'am, kay tungod sa illegal logging, ma'am, na karon ma'am kay naghinay na sila recover katong pagbaha jud, ma'am, kay bang simbahan lang jud ang nabilin dito, ma'am, tanan jud tao, ma'am, gabi pa jung dako ay kadlaw dako na wash out jud sila tanan, ma'am.
See? Because of the illegal logging. Diba? Kahit sabihin natin na nagtanim naman din kami ng bagong puno. Yung puno na yun, seedling pa yun. Right? Hindi pa sila enough na maka-withstand ng withstand with the heavy rains and the mud na galing sa pagbagsak ng ulan. Diba? So, nakikita natin kung ano kalaki yung impact at ano kalaki yung loss and damages that causes by this illegal logging. Diba?
Kakaingon po gani itong mga tao dito, ma'am, nga ano daw to, ma'am, kanang sala po daw to sa mga tao, ma'am, kay nibalos lang daw ang nature sa ila kung sa ilang gibuhat sa kalikasan, ma'am.
Yes, that is true. Everything we do to the nature, it comes back to us. Just like, for example, nagtatapon tayo ng basura kahit saan. Tinatapon natin sa mga ilog, sa mga dagat. Now, when a typhoon comes, ano yung makikita natin sa dagat? Sa dalampasigan.
Balik siya sa shore, ma'am.
Yes.
Ang mga basura.
Yes, nasa shore yung mga basura na tinatapon natin. Aside from that, hindi lang tayo ang nag-suffer sa ginawa natin. Even the marine life. Diba? Yung mga
poison o makakaon og basura, ma'am.
Yes, very good. Aside from that, yung iba, yung mga whales, no, nagiging endanger sila because of our negligence. Ang dali lang naman na magtapon ng basura dun sa basurahan, di ba? Pero mas pinili natin na magtapon sa kung saan-saan. Aside from that, the infrastructures, the facilities, or the factories na nagre-release ng mga toxic substances and toxic materials sa dagat or sa ilog. Diba? Kaya napopoison yung mga isda, naiiba yung kulay ng tubig sa dagat or sa ilog. Diba? Nung may nakita ba kayong isang documentary ni Jessica Soho na yung isang ilog daw is biglang bumubula out of nowhere. Bumubula siya, parang mura galing ng laba dito, o isa ka batalyon, kaya tigyon niyang bulaa. But because of the toxic substances that was released by the factory near that river. Yun. Ang daming mga nawalan ng pangkabuhayan, nawalan ng bahay, nawalan ng buhay because of the negligence of the humanity. Aside from that, the illegal mining, hindi lang sa landslide, but of course, kahit pa walang ulan, walang typhoon, no, out of nowhere, bumabagsak bigla yung kabukiran. Mababagsak yung bukid. Mura siya ganang nag-collapse. Because, puno na og mga tunnel and mga bangag-bangag dito sa sulod sa bukid. Na kapag, for example, kapag dili na makaya sa bukid, tungod kay empty na siya sa sulod, sa ilalom, makuan na siya, mag-collapse lang siya og kalit. Diba? Or just for example, kung heavy rains, no, dili na kaya, bugat na kay ang yuta because of the water, mag-collapse siya. So, inana gyapon. Dako gyapon kay siya og damages. Now, again, the ecosystem is not just about the mountains and the here in the land, no? Of course, kasama na rin yan yung sa maritime or sa marine life. Sa marine life environment. Now, environmental vulnerability can be either intrinsic or extrinsic. Intrinsic vulnerability is related to factors internal to the system, whereas extrinsic vulnerability Extrinsic vulnerability contains factors external to the system, such as present exposure and external hazard. So when you say intrinsic and extrinsic, just like for example, internal and external. When you say internal, nasa loob, right? So when you say intrinsic vulnerability, what is the vulnerability sa internal? Internal factors sa system natin. And when you say extrinsic naman, yung sa external naman. Okay? Ecological vulnerability, thus, recognizes both ecological damage potential and coping capacity. So when you say ecological vulnerability, no, it talks about the potential damage and the coping capacity of the specific area, the specific place or location. Just like, for example, here sa Combal, what is the ecological damage potential of the Combal? Because of the illegal logging and because of they are not aware or they are not prepared for that typhoon. So ang laki ng percentage ng ecological damage potential niyan. Now, what is their coping capacity? So, paano nila yun? Paano sila mag-cope up with the damage na nakuha nila because of their vulnerability? So that is that. Ecosystem vulnerability can be seen as the inability of an ecosystem to tolerate stressors over time and space. So when you say ecosystem vulnerability, it is the inability of an ecosystem to tolerate stressors over time and space. Okay, when you say stressors, these are the typhoons, the calamities, the earthquake, the landslide. That is the stressors. No? So when you say inability, the ecosystem cannot. The ecosystem is unable to tolerate. When you say tolerate, it talks about pag-tolerate niya sa mga calamity. For example, sa pagbagyo, diba? So, gaano katatag and gaano ba kasolid yung ecosystem natin na hindi siya titibag sa bagyong yan. That they can tolerate the stressors. So, for example, sa isa ka bukid, mayon ka na, ay, pila na ni katuig, pila na kabagyo ang nilabay ani, wala gid ni siya na tumpag, wala gid ni siya na guba. So, that ecosystem, that mountain itself can tolerate the different stressors over time and space. No, for how many years? Wala gid siya na guba, wala gid siya na landslide. So when you say aquatic, it talks about the marine life. Yung sa karagatan. No? Sa karagatan, sa tubig, sa pond, even dun sa aquarium ninyo. Bakit? Yung nasa aquarium ninyo, hindi ba yan galing sa dagat? Hindi ba yan galing sa pond? Right? Regardless if saltwater animals yan or sa river lang nakuha. That is considered as aquatic or marine life. Ang terrestrial naman talks about the forest and all other elements na present naman sa forest. The trees, na mga century-old trees, and aside from that, the animals living in that forest. That is that. So next meeting, we are going to discuss about the exposure, coping capacity, and resilience vulnerability can be greatly modified by the following factors. Ito yung mga factors ito. So we are going to talk about this next meeting.